Hi everybody, welcome back to Home Smart Buyers. Inspector Tom here. Today we're going to be talking about attic framing, some of the specifics that the IRC, International Residential Code, calls out. Know that the intent of this channel is it's not to make you a home inspector. It's good information so you can go out and take a look at your own home, communicate effectively with the builder, and if you feel like things are going sideways, you'll know it's time to bring in a third party. So you're busy, I'm busy, let's get rolling.
So the ridge board is that top horizontal board. Typically there's not a lot of issues on that with new construction. Minimum standards, you want it to be 1 inch thick, and the width has to be greater than the cut ends of the rafters. Other than that, there's not a lot going on. So collar ties are the board that's horizontal right below that ridge board. Now, a couple of standards. Has to be at least a 1x4. That's usually not an issue. It's located in the upper third. That's usually not an issue. The issue is that they should not be spaced more than 4 feet apart. Sometimes you'll see them 5 or 6 feet apart. The other thing that you'll see is if you've got a more decorative peak, usually towards the front of the home, they'll just forget to put them in there altogether. So purlins are midpoint supports for a longer section of roofing material. And the standard around it is that that purlin has to be 45 degrees. The width of the lumber has to be the same as the width of the rafter. Typically it's a 6x. Where you typically see errors on this is that they should not go greater than 8 feet where they're unsupported. So at the lower part of the rafter, you want to make sure that it's seated properly, and it should be sitting on nothing less than 1.5 inches of wood material. On the other end, where it meets the ridge board, it should be right across from the opposite side, from the rafter coming in from the other side of the roof. There shouldn't be more than 1.5 inches separating those two. So while you're in the attic, just take a quick look up at the roof decking materials. Between each 4x8 sheet of plywood, you should see these little clips. So attics require a lot of airflow, and the IRC is really vocal about where it comes from and the sizing. So let's first talk about sizing. 1/150th. That number is important because for every 150 square feet of attic floor space, you've got to have 1 square foot of ventilation. So easy math, we call it 600 square feet of floor space in the attic, and you need to have 4 square feet of space. Next, where is that air opening coming from, right? You want part of it at the top of the roof, and you want part of it located down lower near the bottom. So, according to the IRC, you want not less than 40% and not more than 50% of the required ventilating area located in the upper portion of the attic space. So, long and the short of that one, you want about 50% of the ventilation at the top. You want 50% of the ventilation at the bottom. So to get more specific, the ventilation that's near the top, well, it should be located not more than 3 feet below the ridge or the highest point of the space. This is going to sound counterintuitive, but custom-built homes tend to get this wrong more than production homes. And the reason being is that you've got builders that are saying, hey, I understand the building standards, but I don't want these openings visible at all, right? I've got this big, beautiful home. I'm going to put the openings towards the back. Just know that the potential exists for there to be really, really warm attic areas, which in turn become heat traps that will transfer into the living space. One last point on this is that if you've got soffit vents or if you've got ventilation coming in through the eaves, you've got to have a 1-inch clearance gap on that so that there's unobstructed flow of air. That's where the baffles and making sure that the baffles are properly located becomes really important. So first thing, when it comes to attic access, when do you need one? Well, if you've got more than 30 square feet and your entry area into it is more than 30 inches high, you got to have an attic access. And it needs to be what's considered a ready access, something that's relatively easy to get to. So the IRC draws a very specific distinction between an access door and one of those horizontal fold-down ladders. The access door needs to be insulated at the same level as the walls. Those fold-down ladders need to be insulated R10. Builders will often just install the cheapest attic ladder there is, and it'll have basically no insulating properties whatsoever. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about trusses. So the first thing that I'd want you to know is that trusses are an engineered product, and deviations to them, whether that's notching or cutting or getting them in a different order at a different location, all need to be approved by the designer and or engineer. So engineered products need engineered solutions. So that's number one. Number two, these things get beat up. Like, I mean, literally, they come from the factory, they get slid off the back of a truck, they're hanging out in the mud and the yuck of the front yard, days, weeks, even months sometimes, sitting out there. And then they get picked up by a crane, they get thrown up on the top, and they get hit by a hammer. And so these things they go through the ringer. And so one of the things I'd say, you want to look at every plate, every metal point of connection, and make sure that that thing is intact and it's not bent and going the opposite direction. You see it all the time. So according to the IRC, a design drawing has to be available, and it also has to be provided with the shipment, and it must be approved prior to being installed. So how do you figure out if they did it right? Well, you look at it, and there's a little paper tag that hangs that tells you the exact location. You look at your diagram, your engineered drawings, match it up. That's it. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward.